Hey guys, what's going on? John here from What's Spinning here tonight to chat about this new Sleater Kinney album, The Center Won't Hold. Sleater Kinney are an Olympia, Washington legendary punk rock trio consisting of Corinne Tucker, Carrie Brownstein, until as very recently Janet Weiss. Now, their mid-90s work I enjoyed very casually over the years, but around the time of the Dig Me Out album, Sleater Kinney actually started putting out some of my favorite albums in punk rock and indie rock. The songs here were just so catchy and passionate and immediate, they demanded to be listened to many times. And by the time the year 2000 rolled around, Sleater Kinney were making some of my favorite albums in all of rock, like One Beat and my personal favorite, All Hands on the Bad One. Now, I know I'm in the minority here, but I'm really not that into the Woods. I mean, yeah, I certainly get the appeal. The freaking performances on this album are absolutely ridiculous, but I kind of miss the earlier, just more straightforward days of the band. We all know what happened next. They took about 9 or 10 years off, came back with No Cities to Love, and honestly, I thought they hadn't missed a beat. It was just such a catchy and triumphant return to form. They were really putting out some of their catchiest tracks yet. So here we are with a brand new Sleater Kinney album. However, with the months leading up to this album, I had my guard up, kind of. Janet Weiss left the band after all these years, saying that she didn't like the direction the band was going in. And this kind of raised some red flags for me because most of the time I don't listen to singles up until maybe a few days before an album's release. I like to go in super fresh. And then I heard that, of course, St. Vincent was behind production on this album, and I usually like her production quite a bit. So let's chat about this new direction for these legends. Album starts off with its title track, The Center Won't Hold. It's a very slow, crunchy start. To be quite frank, it's actually kind of ugly. It's not really what I was expecting to hear at all. And the vocal delivery here is very hypnotic. That I do kind of think is cool. But I feel like for most of this track, I'm just kind of sitting around waiting for something to happen and get interesting. Now, there are a few sort of interesting instrumentals that pop in and all. And in the last 45 seconds, things get wild, and that's kind of what I wanted to hear the whole time. But if you told me from the start that this was a Sleater Kinney track, I wouldn't have believed you, and honestly, that's a problem to me. Then we have Hurry On Home, and it's getting very obvious very quick. This is a very robotic, very stiff-sounding album. But just how easy it seemed like some of their early albums came to these three ladies makes this kind of a disappointing new direction for me, at least. I will say this, not only for this track, but for this entire album, these performances are still spot on. Like Corinne Tucker is still coming off dynamic as hell and just so passionate, and I love that. Not to mention, they still have a really great way of putting forward what they're trying to say. But St. Vincent on production just sounds like she's just gotten way too many of her own ideas mixed up in this album, honestly. By the time we get to tracks like Can I Go On, I'm asking myself, just why is this album so sluggish? This one just sort of drags along. I kind of feel like Corinne's vocals are just in charge and dragging the rest of this track. Thank God she can sing. She's led performances before in the past, but the rest of this track is just so freaking boring. And I don't want to be that guy, because a lot of tracks on here sound like it. This literally sounds like a leftover from St. Vincent's Mass Seduction. And Ruins is honestly my least favorite track here. I mean, there are some parts of this track that I do kind of love. I mean, the imagery is pretty wild and interesting. But this is just not where I was hoping I would be hearing these ladies right now. One just creeps on so slow, and some of these instrumentals I can't wrap my head around. And it's stretched out to almost 6 minutes. It's just really bad. And I could say the same thing about this album's finale, Broken. Is this really where we are right now? A piano ballad for a finale from Sleater Kinney. Now, yes, it's tender and it's emotional, but this just sounds so cheap to me. I just feel like Sleater Kinney are so much more better than this. If I heard this in a club somewhere, I would honestly be disappointed. Lyrically, this album is still fascinating, and the performances, more often than not, are great, but this directional shift, I can't seem to get my head around it. But when focused, Sleater Kinney still have a lot to say. Take, for example, Reach Out. Even though this album overall is flimsy, tracks like this are still really great. But even in this album's best moments like this, it still does feel a little wobbly. I feel like if it wasn't for Corinne's performance here, this track would just crumble. But I digress. Reach Out is actually a really fantastic track. It's got a great groove, an anthemic chorus, some big guitars. Honestly, it's everything that I've come to know and love from Sleater Kinney. And for a few short minutes, I just get reminded of just how much purpose this band used to have. Restless, even though it's still very stripped down and almost indie popish, is actually really sweet. It's just this kind of moment where I just realize when they really strip things down and just go very straightforward, they still have so much to say and it comes off great. This is just nothing short of a really very catchy, instantaneous indie jam. And not to mention, these are some of the best harmonies on the entire album. Like, this may not be what I'm used to completely from Sleater Kinney, but if this is like sort of the direction they're going in, I can't be too pissed with this. But this album is just really all over the place. Take, for example, Bad Dance. Yes, the upbeat groove on this track is nice. But outside of that, this track is straight up goofy. When have I ever said that about a Sleater Kinney album? But there are a couple more nice surprises from Sleater Kinney here. Take, for example, Love, which follows Ruins and kind of saves the day for me. Like, I still don't know why the band just sounds so stiff. I really don't get that. But the upbeat nature to this track is great, and this one actually has some of the best one-liners on the entire album. Like, Love is a short, very short track, as a matter of fact. But yeah, it's a breath of fresh air. And The Future Is Here, while it's easily the most synthetic sound on the album, I actually think it's probably the best track here, especially as far as this sound goes. It's emotional and it goes very deep into themes of technology and like love in the modern age. It's really, honestly, very well done. And it's just so catchy and just simple, and I love it. I mean, yeah, this is still far from the Sleater Kinney sound that I grew up with, but this is at least a fascinating evolution for the band, which I wish this album was overall. But I do have to say, though, as one last little twist, the St. Vincent vibes continue to be, like, intense. And finally, we have The Dog, The Body, and I really wasn't anticipating enjoying another very slow, dreary tune. But thankfully, it opens up into one of the most gigantic tracks here. And lyrically, this is actually one of the most stunning performances of the bunch. It's got a big sing-along chorus that I can't help but get involved in. It's just like for a few short minutes, I'm just in my happy place. Like, if I got a few more tracks like this, I wouldn't feel like the band was so lost right about now. So overall, while the dynamic lyrics and the very explosive performances are still intact with Sleater Kinney's music, this directional shift for me is a little too hard to swallow. So many tracks here just drag along, and I'm just sitting here twiddling my thumbs, waiting for one of their legendary anthems to break out, and 9 times out of 10, that's not really the case. Not to mention, St. Vincent on production, I expected a lot more of. For me, I'm feeling like a light 6 on this album. Let me know what you guys think down below. If you liked the video, be sure to give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know what you would like for me to chat about in the future. Until next time, have a great day, guys.